Greetings, citizens. Today I'm going to discuss a video by Stefan Molyneux called Socialists Take Greece. What this means for Europe and you. And basically, in this video, Stefan Molyneux repeats the old line of the conservatives who say that suddenly Greece has fallen to the socialists. Like Greece was not socialistic until now, like Europe is not socialistic, like the United States are not to some extent socialistic, like Canada or Scandinavia aren't socialistic, like any state on earth is not to some extent socialistic. So he is starting with a non sequitur. Socialists take Greece. I mean, take it from whom? From socialists? The real thing that happened in the 25th of January was that socialists of the progressive color, the leftist socialists, took Greece from the hands of the conservative socialists. The conservative socialists, as I have discussed in previous videos, um, basically have a, a heritage that includes personalities like Otto von Bismarck and Charles de Gaulle. And basically, they are the kind of people that want to save you from the communists, and then they impose another type of socialism, the conservative socialism, just for the sake of, keeping the masses down and not letting them go to the hard drugs, which is of course communism. So in reality, what they're doing is they're telling you, come with us. We have some goodies, so that you don't go to the real tough guys. Anyway, 2 minutes in, I need to start the video and start talking about it.
Radio, I hope you're doing well. So if you've been following the Greek elections, you'll know that the socialist slash communist coalition has gained control of Greece. It still remains to be seen whether they get the 150 seats that they need for a clear majority.
Okay, let's start first with an important mistake. Socialist slash communist. Why do you see that? I mean, I'm posting this video a month later, and basically, Molyneux is full of shit. Because first of all, Syriza uh, is not communist. It's far from being communist. It does have some communists involved. It did have some communist um, minor forces involved, but they were really far from actual communists. And what really is the case, they are hardly, I mean, they are socialists in the same sense that the previous party was socialists. I mean, they do want to steal wealth from people. In that sense, they are socialists. Um, but it would be stupid to say that this is somehow a great difference from what happened previously.
Or whether they will continue to build the coalition that they've been working on for the past 10 years to gain power. This is, in my opinion, a turning point in the economic and, as is so often the case with an economic turning point, a turning point in the political fortunes of Europe, and not for the better.
Oh, gee whiz, Mr. Molyneux, I didn't expect this to be said. I mean, you said the red line here when the leftists take power in Greece. I mean, the center left has had power in Greece in the past, and the actual left having power in Greece is no big deal compared to the damage caused already. The damage they can cause, in fact, well, let me give it to you this way. The previous governments have screwed so much the country that it's nigh impossible to screw it to that extent. So basically, you're full of shit yet again.
Of course, there are leftist coalitions all throughout Europe that are cheering in the streets tonight as the grip of the unbelievably undead zombie called Marxism continues to rise from the grave. Just when you think you've hammered a stake through its heart, it's like the end of that horror movie when you're walking away from the grave.
Yeah, Marxism. I think you know what Marxism is, and I think you also know that Syriza it doesn't have the capacity of implementing Marxism, and the reason it does not have the capacity of implementing Marxism is because Marxism has a specific methodology that includes stages of transition. Now, Syriza is not Marxist. We know that. If they were, they would impose a dictatorship of the proletariat as a first step towards complete communism. So they are not Marxists at all. They're not communists in the actual sense of the word. You're full of shit there as well. Go on.
The hand comes up and takes down another culture, another country, and another civilization. The people who have gotten into power in Greece today are unrepentant socialists slash Marxists. One of their chief economic advisors is an out-and-out Marxist, PhD in economics. He's done papers on Das Kapital, and we will get to some of his astoundingly Wile E. Coyote paint a tunnel on the side of the mountain and run through it approach to dealing with these problems. But let's just...
Okay. I assume he's talking about Yanis Varoufakis, and my personal assessment of the guy, I have spoken through tweets with the guy, and he's also full of shit. I mean, yeah, he's a socialist, but in reality, Yanis Varoufakis is simply the Greek equivalent of Keynes. He's that kind of socialist. He's like a gradualist socialist, like that. But to say that he's, a Marxist would be way too a very far-fetched statement, to say the least. Plus, I don't really think that the fact that you've read a book makes you a Marxist, or the fact that you might have at some point been stupid enough to suggest that there is merit in a certain book. That this turns you somehow into an actual Marxist. We are taking into account what he says now and who he is now and what he does, most importantly. We are taking into account his actions right now. And his actions right now are Keynesian, basically. Molyneux, you're full of shit yet again. Go on.
To a brief history. Of course, Greece joined the euro in 2001 and immediately got access to cheap credit. See, in the free market, the more risky it is to lend to you, the more people are going to charge for lending to you, and that's what...
My friend, in the free market, first of all, states would not be able to get money. I mean, it would be very risky for somebody to invest in theft. And investing in a state means you invest in thieves. You invest in future theft. Now, you know what? First of all, I do support completely the idea that bailouts are wrong. The bailouts, the Greek bailout of any kind is wrong. In reality, uh, Greece should sink in terms of credit rating, and the very element of dropping uh, your credit rating means that we will at last be allowed um, to work without having state intervention, because the state will not have power to impose itself. You see, this is what you're going to say, obviously, but I'll let you go on.
What slows down your borrowing. That's how it's supposed to work.
Exactly. You see, the thing is, basically the governments until now, and obviously the governments, I guess the next governments, all they want to do uh, is go to the markets again. They want to have access to the markets, and by markets we mean the global usurers, the global investors in theft, which is basically state bonds. Um, and what they really want to do is say to people, "Hey, at last we can once more get money from abroad. We can once more borrow money and buy you all the goodies. We can at last uh, start again with our old system of having quasi um, mercenary army of voters voting for us simply because we give them privileges over the rest of the producing class." This would not happen, obviously, as you have said, in the free market, simply because the ratings would drop. Uh, Even the worst thugs who want to invest in state bonds would understand that it's too risky and it's not worth the risk, essentially. And this, to a great extent, would allow the society to restart on its own without the need of the state. Go on.
But of course, when Greece gave up its own currency, the drachma, and adopted the euro, it got access to cheap credit. Germany's credit rating AAA, Greece hovering around triple C, completely calamitous crap. I think I'm not a technical economist, but they got access to cheap credit largely because they were more responsible nations in the euro. And what happened? Well, they
responsible nations. Um, I would like to commentate on that. In reality, Germany and all the others, they're not responsible nations. Uh, First of all, I do not accept the term responsible as a nation. There are responsible people, there are not responsible nations. A nation includes a lot of people who are irresponsible inevitably, because in such a large geographical territory, you will inevitably have people who are irresponsible. Um, what is important here is to say that responsible in the lingo of the Anglo-Saxon Protestants, like Molyneux, and I mean cultural Protestants, means um, that they are obedient to the state. The reason the states of the South and the reason the states in Africa and in other banana republics are going very badly is precisely because people do not trust them, because people have a natural anti-statist urge. Even though they might be supporting the state programs, they have a natural urge against the state. And that's why the state apparatus is working like a clockwork in Scandinavia or in Germany, but it's not working like a clockwork in the South because people in the North are obedient. That means more statist. Go on.
The Greek government went on a massive, unprecedented spending spree, $7.5 billion for the 2004 Athens Games. Now,
well, yeah, I guess that was a piece of propaganda of the government. They wanted to show that at last we have earned our place in the world. In reality, I guess that it was completely unnecessary. Plus, the Olympic Games are a sham because the Olympic Games are actually were actually made for Greeks by Greeks. They had nothing to do with the worldwide bullshit. They were specifically for Greeks. They had nothing to do with the entire world. Um, you could call them racist. I personally am not a person that cares about nationalism, but the actual Olympics had nothing to do with today's Olympics. So basically, um, it was completely unnecessary for Greece to even try to host them. Look, well, I'm going to push the video a bit forward because, time.
and so John Milius, a self-described Marxist with a PhD in economics, and magic. It says the ECB, European Central Bank, can do a lot of things. One solution could be a swap. So what?
Oh, well, he's talking about another guy, not Yanis Varoufakis. Now, Milios, yes, of course, he's a dumbass. Look, I'm not saying there are not there are not dumbasses in the government. Of course, there are. I'm not saying there are not people who have very heavy influences from the Marxist left, sure. But what I am saying is that the most fundamental people, the heaviest personalities, the ones who make the big difference, um, are actually much more pragmatic. And by pragmatic, I mean they are still statist, but they are more like Keynesian. Um, and I'm focusing on Mr. Varoufakis here. Go ahead.
He says is in exchange for the bonds currently held by the ECB, right, that the Greeks have to pay him. Milius wants to give the central bank a different kind of bond, which is called a zero coupon perpetual. And the fact that people can say this stuff with a straight face is amazing to me. A zero coupon perpetual is a bond that pays zero interest for the entire duration of the bond, which in this case would pretty much be forever.
Oh man, yeah. I did not hear him say that. I might have missed that part, but if he did say that, yes, it's dumb. It's completely dumb. But on the other hand, it's perfectly good because at last the so-called investors will know that they should not invest in the theft of the Greek people. In my opinion, the more stupid our politicians sound, the better. The better for our society. Moving on to the middle of the video.
Great tragedies of 20th century economics up until the 1930s. Argentina had the same per capita income as America and then slid down the same socialist sinkhole as is taking down so much of the rest of the world. And so if they're not going to pay the bondholders, and of course one of the biggest bondholder I imagine is the European Central Bank, what's going to happen? Well, there are a number of Greek banks that are on the verge of bankruptcy because, of course, there's a fear with the socialists coming in. Everyone wants to grab their property and run. I mean, it's like Gollum slinking around a fishmonger. He covers up the halibut. And
yeah, and surely these banks are going to become bankrupt because they are employing the same system that is being employed in the Western civilized world, um, which is called the fractional reserve banking, which is a complete scam. Go on.
And so billions and billions of dollars have left Greece and Greek banks, creating fears of a bank run. And what's happening is the Greeks are saying, well, the new party has these slogans and these promises that they're not going to pay their bondholders. And this is a huge problem. Could hugely destabilize the euro, which of course has recently plunged in value considerably. And so they can very easily say to the Eurozone countries, hey, that's a nice little currency you got going there. It'd be a real shame if something happened to it. Now, how about you subsidize us some more? What do you say? Now, they also think that the European Union should fund a massive job creation program to combat this 25% unemployment rate and 50% youth. They also want back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, I do believe that as well. I mean, if you're the European Union, you are made of socialists. First of all, the European Union is basically a union of socialists. Any state union in reality is a union of socialists. So it would be inconsistent to say that, oh, we want to put our red line here, we don't want to help anymore. We helped until now, but we don't want to help anymore. We don't want more intervention. This might seem like a slippery slope fallacy, but it's not really the case. Go on.
Thanks to write off debt for those who can't pay for it, including mortgage debt. The Greek government would provide up to 30% of mortgage payments. These socialist communists also want to nationalize the banks, and they want to provide free electricity and water to people who can't afford to pay for them. They're going to nationalize electricity and water production. They nationalize railroads, airports, mail, other subjects, free health benefits for low-income, homeless, or unemployed people. They want to double public healthcare funding, nationalize the remaining private hospitals, and eliminate any private participation in the national health system. They want to raise the minimum salary and increase.
Okay. I'm going to stop you right there. Are you reading from what they said before the elections? Because before the elections, a lot of people tend to say a lot of things. Pretty much like a man before he gets laid tends to say that you're my world, blah blah blah, and all that. And when he's done and he realizes what kind of bitch he had in his bedroom, he just does what he has to do. So you need to consider that perhaps. Go on.
Unemployment subsidies, and they want to establish a 75% tax for people with an income of over €500,000. They want to increase taxes on big companies, and they want to forcibly prevent banks from moving capital overseas.
Okay, is this bad? Um, well, first, yes, but if you come to think about it, you will realize that what is the best way to implement our ideas in a country? And the answer is you let the socialists ruin the country. Now, if all that Molyneux said was indeed the case, um, the country the country will lie in ruins in about 6 months to a year. Now, we already know that this is impossible because not even the previous government managed to wreck the country um, to the extent we're talking about. And the previous government was really the definition of, being morons, the definition of criminal masterminds. Um, so it just feels unlikely, uh, and it feels unlikely because they're not exactly so smart to be able to wreck the country Marxist style in 6 months or a year period. The only people who can remotely be able to do that in a period of 2 or 3 years are the actual communists, and I don't even think they are able to do that right now. Go on.
So this is going to be the usual socialist horror show of controlling, managing, and herding the tax livestock to make sure nobody tries to tear off a leg or two getting through the barbed wire fence of increased.
Okay, hang on. This is what's happening in the entire world. Come on now. Moving on to the 20th minute.
Gives me that, give me that. And they know that they can't sustain it. They know that their children are going to suffer for it, but for some reason,
Oh, hang on, wait.
murderous people, sociopathic people, control freaks, and manipulators of every kind will always try to bribe you into submission. And it is a tragic failing of the human soul that we are so tempted to give up liberty for temporary tchotchkes, for goodies, for the bribes, which are unsustainable.
No, it is not terrible. People are much like a electrical current. Now, if you are not aware, I will inform you that electrical current is much like the most lazy thing in the universe. It's like it follows the quickest path, always. This is precisely why it will follow uh, your body to reach its destination, which will electrocute you and kill you. Uh, what does this tell you about people? This tells you that people will choose the what seems to be the easy path, which means what seems to be the most profitable. Now, when you make theft profitable, you can expect people to choose it. And the reason people choose theft is because they are absolved of any responsibilities. They do not have responsibility of their actions. If they choose to plunder the stuff of their fellow man, they do not have any recoil. And this is what explains it. It's basically that we are all, to some extent, admitting that we accept socialism, and socialism is theft. We accept theft to some extent, and this is causing the problem. Go ahead.
Most people sacrifice enormously for their children. When the government comes in, that all just seems to vanish. It seems to just fade away. People are just, give me, gives me that, give me that, give me that. And they know that they can't sustain it. They know that their children are going to suffer for it. But for some reason, these men and women who get up at night and nurse their babies when they have colic or when they have fever and take them to the hospital and take them to whatever the equivalent of Little League games is in Greece and other Eurozone countries, the parents who really do their best to take care of their children allow unbelievable levels of debt to bury the future of their children. Do your homework.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, this is basically my personal accusation towards most people here, and this is also my accusation to most people in the United States. The fact that they have no problem dragging the future generations in debt slavery. And what's happening here is pretty much the same in in kind of a different way. Anyway, it's like trying to drag. It's like trying to get off drugs. The beginning will be like hitting concrete from 100 meters away, and it will be a very, very slow comeback. Or it's like you've not used your muscles for like 2 years because you were in a coma, and suddenly you have to run a marathon. It's mind blowing, and this is what society will have to face at some point eventually. And I'm not talking about the Greek society or the American society. I'm talking about any society, especially those who have allowed themselves to depend on the state too much. These societies would be pretty much like a guy recovering from a coma having to go run a marathon about an hour after he recovered, which of course is fucking ridiculous. Go on.
Study well so that when you graduate, there will be no jobs, but rather a smoking crater of the former economy we were supposed to manage,
Well, in reality, studying and wasting 4 years of your life in Greece, it's 4 years per degree. Um, for a stupid degree, whatever that is, to get unemployed. The reason this is happening, and the reason usually you're required to have degrees, is not because you will use the degrees, but mostly because they want the workforce, the young workforce, to be delayed so that the older generations who are unemployed get jobs. Because if the older generations are unemployed and suddenly there is a huge influx of new labor, young people, the older generations, even if they are like, 25 or 30, they're gonna deal with a lot more unemployment. And usually, it's like every government prefers to just deal with the problem temporarily and leave the real burden to the next generations. I'm going to move on a bit.
Face painter over and they'll charge, but parents don't. So being on the receiving end of an offer of free electricity, we'll subsidize your loans, we'll get your debts gotten rid of, we'll get you free health. I mean, they're putting you in the position of being a helpless child. And it is tragic that a once proud race, a once proud nation, and really the inverted pyramid foundation of so much of Western culture has now turned into a bunch of greedy whiners. I'm sorry, it's true. Listen.
Well, yeah, they are greedy whiners to some extent, but you have to admit that everybody hides a greedy whiner in himself, and in reality, from the moment you accept the state, you are a greedy whiner. You have a a common denominator with thieves. You are a thief. You accept theft. You do not accept theft to the extent a communist accepts it, but you do accept theft. Moving on.
That there was a dearth of wisdom among the high and mighty and powerful. Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. I mean, Plato had to flee. He was sold into slavery for attempting to get into politics. Narrowly escaped with his life. In Greece, of all countries, the warning labels that have been permanently affixed to the flags of the state have been visible for thousands of years. A smoker with those pictures of lung cancer and emphysema, and the smoker can't say, I didn't know. I didn't know that giving all this power to the state was going to have a bad outcome. I didn't know that selling off the precious gift of freedom from force for the sake of some vitamin shots, maybe a flu shot and some rent subsidies, was an unwise idea.
So somehow I have to be wiser. I mean, the average Greek, I'm not the average Greek, but the average Greek has to be wiser than the average American and somehow know that the state is bad. It's hard to realize that because the basic problem is that everybody accepts theft to some extent. Even Americans, even the Republicans, even the constitutionalists in America, even libertarians, except for very hardcore libertarians like anarcho-capitalists. Um, they all accept theft to some extent. This is the reality, and it's just silly to hold Greeks in particular on a different standard. It just doesn't make sense.
I didn't know that imagining that the government had any money of its own to give me was a bad idea. Everybody knows the government has no money. Everybody knows the government prints money or borrows, lies, cheats, and investigates. I mean,
oh, really? I don't think everybody does know that. I mean, uh, people think that government has things. People think that government uh, owns things, and people think that when you're evading taxes, you're stealing from the state, as if the state had something so that you could steal from it. Um, so in reality, no, people actually believe that, and this is one of the myths we need to debunk before we move on to the real issues.
the Greek government themselves said in 2004 after the audit, yes, we lied to get into the European Union because it was a lot easier to rest on Germany's AAA credit rating than to actually restrain our own spending and tell the truth to our population. So you Greeks, you have been thirstily drinking from this black fire hose of political lies for at least a decade. At least a decade ago, they told you they lied about money.
Oh, you evil Greeks! I mean, you evil Greeks! I can't believe you have fallen to that. You should have been so smart, like us Americans, who have allowed the Federal Reserve to exist for like 100 years, or who have allowed the charade of the War of 1861, of Lincoln's anti-secessionist war, to happen. I mean, we are somehow better than you, and you're wrong because for like 10, 30 years or more, you came to depend on the welfare state. Oh my God.
I really, really feel sorry for what Greece is going to go through. But at the same time, there was an ancient Greek saying that will describe the next generation. Even the gods cannot break this rule, say the Greeks. Take what you want and pay for it.
To which I agree, my friend. To which I agree. Take what you want and pay for it. And just like the Greeks will pay for it, everybody will. And that should worry both me and you and everybody, because we are all living in the same world and, thieves, they're around us. Thank you for listening, folks.